Spencer defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome into the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network. We have the Rutgers Scarlet Knights on the autopsy table for this episode. If you're watching on YouTube or streaming this on our Twitter feed at Crunch Time VIP, welcome aboard, and we really appreciate you joining us. If you're listening on your favorite podcast platform, don't worry. Anything that I reference on the screen, I always got you covered. So I got you for the next 27 minutes, and I'm going to take a deep dive into the Rutgers Scarlet Knight because there's so much to unpack here. Head coach Greg Schiano. Now, he actually coached the Rutgers Scarlet Knights back from 2001 to 2011 with a lot of success. However, let me make sure I point this out. They weren't in the same conference that they're in now. The landscape of college football changed quite a bit in the 9 years between him leaving Rutgers and coming back in 2020. Now, since he's been back, we're looking at a record that has not been that impressive. 3-6 his first year, 5-8 in 2021, 4-8 in 2022, 7-6 in the past two seasons. It is something that we must take note of. With the recent expansion of the Big Ten, bringing in programs like USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington, it's not so much the top of the conference that's going to suffer in these cases. It's always that middle tier group of programs because they're going to get pushed further down than where they have been over the past, let's say, 5 or 6 years. So it's always something to keep in mind of when you're looking at these teams like this. All right, let's go ahead and get into the recap. And we always start right there with the betting window. This team back in June had a win total of 6.5. If you took the over by the hair on your chinny chin chin, you were able to get that ticket cash. So had to sweat it out there, but always good to have a winning ticket in your pocket. So they got you there on the season win total, which is the most important. Now, when we look at our in-season composite win total, 3 very unique but highly predictive from a win-loss standpoint. And we had Rutgers at a 7.3, so we had them a tick better than what their record was, but not so much so. Now, what we like about Rutgers is this team's ability to continuously show up week in and week out. Can't take that away from them. Speaking of schedules, 2 components of your overall schedule that we value equally, but differently. Your strength of schedule and your strength of record. Can't have one without the other. So your strength of schedule, when you play in a big time conference like the Big Ten, you're only going to control about 20 to 25% of your schedule, your non-conference. Your in-conference schedule is going to be predetermined by a pure luck of the draw. You may face more middle and bottom tier teams in the conference because of the number of teams in these leagues now. So you're not always going to play a more balanced schedule, and we're going to see less and less of that going forward, just with the over expansion of these conferences. And then your strength of record. Think of that more along the line of your opponent's win-loss record. And for Rutgers, a .417, that was 54th out of 134 teams last year. Now, when we dig into that number even deeper, their opponent's strength of record, .477, that was 106th out of 134 teams last year. So when we pull it up on the screen here for our viewers that are watching on YouTube and Twitter, they'll see those win-loss records. Podcast listeners, stay tuned. I got you covered. Okay, so they started with an FCS opponent, Howard University. Akron was 4-8. Virginia Tech, Washington, Nebraska were all 6-6. Wisconsin and UCLA were both 5-7. USC was 6-6. Minnesota was 7-5. Maryland was 4-8. Illinois 9-3. And then finally, Michigan State was 5-7. You look at this record. Count them, 2 of their opponents had 7 or more wins last year. No team that they faced had double-digit wins. And when you think about the top of the Big Ten Conference last year, they didn't play Oregon. They didn't play Ohio State. They didn't play Penn State. Come to think of it, even with Indiana making the playoffs last year. So the 4 best teams in your conference, and you did not have to play any of them. And you were still under 500 in conference play, 4-5. That's telling me we have some things to talk about here for Rutgers. Speaking of, let's take a look at how good those defenses were that Rutgers played last year. We'll use a baseline number of 68 because that's how many Power 4 teams there were last year in college football. So inside of that top 68, you have Virginia Tech at 28, Washington Huskies 43rd, Nebraska was 14th, Wisconsin was 36th, UCLA was 50th, USC was 38th, Minnesota was 18th, Illinois was 54th, and then finally, Michigan State was 63rd. Yes, none of their opponents were inside of that top 68. However, when you look at the fact that they didn't play the four better teams in the conference, you're talking about an average power ranking of 48. 48, you're looking at a team that defensively would have probably been best case scenario 6-6 last season. A lot of missed opportunities there. All right, let's break down the offense. We're going to give you the NCAA average, the accounting stats or stats that Rutgers had last year, and then we're going to give you our adjusted number for that category. Average team last year scored 28 points per game. Rutgers, 27.9, basically right there on the average. When we adjust for their data, we're looking at an offense that was slightly above average, 29.1. So not a big difference, very slight difference, but something to note. When we look at passing offense last year, average team about 227 yards passing per game. Rutgers was at 205. When we adjust for opponent, we do see an improvement of 13 yards per game to 218 yards per game, still below average passing game. The run game, average team last year, 160 yards per game rushing. Rutgers was at 176. However, when we adjust for opponent, also ticks up 12 more yards to 189 yards per game. So something to keep in mind with that number. And then total offense. Average team last year, 387 yards per game. Rutgers, accounting stats say 381. When we adjust for opponent, we come up with a number that says 407. So 25 yards better when we adjust for opponent. Now let's dive deep into the advanced numbers here. Average team adjusted drives ending with a score, either a touchdown or field goal, 40% of the time. Rutgers, surprisingly, was at 49%, so a significant increase there over the average team. Drives ending with a touchdown. Average team adjusted last season was 29%. Again, Rutgers, 37% of their drives ended with a touchdown. And third down conversion, average team was at 39%. Rutgers at 43%. So you're thinking this offense should have been a lot more than 27.9 points per game. On the surface, I would absolutely agree with that statement. This team did a great job of protecting the quarterback. 16 sacks last season, about 8 better than the average. And this team only committed 8 turnovers. Again, you would think an offense that is committing less than 1 turnover a game, that much better than the average team on third downs, did a great job of scoring touchdowns with their drives and then putting points on the board. You would think this offense would have been averaging about 36 points per game. I wonder if the advanced numbers are going to give me a little bit more insight. Let's talk about our 3 E's. How efficient, explosive, and effective was your offense last year? And for Rutgers, 19th in effective offense for us last year, 53rd in explosive offense, and then 43rd in effective offense. When you sum that up, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights were our 39th ranked offense last year in college football. That's surprising for a team that only won 7 games. So let's see if we can spot some trends with the defense. start to put this picture together a little bit. And again, we're going to look at how good were the offenses that Rutgers defense went up against last year. We're going to stick with that baseline of 68. Virginia Tech had the 34th ranked offense last season for us. Nebraska was 67th. Wisconsin was 66th. USC was 27th. Minnesota was 58th. Maryland was 60th. Illinois was 45th. 7 of their opponents had an offense inside of the top 68. However, none of their opponents were inside of the top 25. When you don't have the 4 best offenses in the conference on your schedule, this is an indictment for this unit. And I'll get to the numbers and why I say that here in just a moment. So you're looking at an average opponent's offense being ranked 67th. This is probably on a 5-7 team from an offensive standpoint last year. I said an indictment on the defense. Let's get to those numbers right here, right now. Points per game last year. Defense allowed 23.8 points per game. When we adjust for opponent, that just goes up a little bit to 24.8. So less than a point there when we adjust for opponent. Pass defense, 234 yards per game. When we adjust that for opponent, 218. So an improvement of about 16 yards there. Rush defense, 147 yards per game. When we adjust for opponent, goes up about 22 yards to 169 yards per game. And then total offense is going to be basically a wash. 382 yards per game allowed. We had it adjusted 387. So you're talking about less than a first down differential there. Now, here's something that I want you to keep in mind when I go through these numbers, because you're going to see something that may not jive with you, and that's why I'm going to walk through it very carefully. Rutgers opponents average drives ending with a score 37.7%. Keep that number in mind as I give you this number here. Opponents drives ending with a touchdown, when we adjust it, is 34.4% of the time. So when Rutgers was giving up points, they were giving up touchdowns and not field goals. That's significant for me. And then third down conversions adjusted 41.4%. This defense did not do a great job of getting after the opponent's quarterbacks. 19 sacks last year. Their opponents converting on fourth down, 11 conversions, 21 attempts, 52%, just a little bit better than the average last year. And this defense forced 12 turnovers. Problematic for me when you can't force more turnovers than that. Let's take a look at the 3 E's on defense, because these will tell you a real good picture of why this team finished 7-5. Remember the offensive numbers I gave you were solid, top 50 in 2 categories, 53rd in another one, overall 39th ranked offense. I told you why the win-loss record will make sense. Here's why. As far as effective defense play, 70th. As far as giving up explosive plays, 95th. And as far as an efficiency defense, 79th. This was the 82nd ranked defense in college football for us last year. So as solid as your offense was, your defense, not so much so. And then special teams, because we talk about the 3 phases of the game. Special teams, absolute inconsistent in all areas. 75% field goal percentage. About 12 percentage points below the average. Your average yards per punt, 40.1 yards per punt, 115th out of 134 teams. So you didn't have a reliable field goal kicker. Your punter, probably one of the worst in college football last year. And then a defense that would give up big chunk plays, and those big chunk plays would probably end in touchdown drives. That's how you sit there with the record that you sit with. Now, let's talk about the head coach in our coaching and situational breakdown here. Coach Sciano last year in one-score games, 3 wins, 3 losses. And then against quality opponents. Remember, I said they didn't face the top 4 teams in the conference. The best team that they faced in conference was Illinois. After that, you're looking at a 7-5 Minnesota team as your next toughest game. And when you look at the losses and who they came to outside of Illinois, I'm looking at you lose to a 6-6 Nebraska, 5-7 Wisconsin, 5-7 UCLA, and 6-6 against USC. You go 0-4 in that stretch. We got some issues with coaching. And then going forward on fourth downs, Sciano, actually one of the more aggressive head coaches with that, almost 16% of the time, ranks 40th out of 144 qualifying head coaches last year. Now, should he have been that aggressive is a whole nother question. Out of 24 attempts, 12 conversions, 50%. I would venture to bet if we dig through some of the losses, you're looking at a 3-point loss to UCLA. You're looking at a 7-point loss to Nebraska. Could you have won more of those games if your fourth down conversion was a little bit better or your decision making was better? It's very well possible. All right, we got some time here. Let's take a look at the quarterback position because young man that was there, and I'm truly going to butcher his name. So I'm going to just call him AK. I hate butchering last names, and I did not practice the pronunciation before the pod. So forgive me there for not fully going the full measure there. But you're talking about a quarterback that completed 54% of his passes, almost 2,700 yards, 18 touchdowns, but 7 INTs. He was the backup quarterback for Minnesota for a couple of years, and got his opportunity at Rutgers, and some serious questions there. Combined with them losing to the NFL, their running back, Big Kyle there, and you're now losing over 1,200 yards rushing, 13 touchdowns, and I'm looking at it, 100. Let's ballpark it, 120 yards of total offense from scrimmage from Big Kyle there. Outside of him, no production anywhere on this offense. Miller, the wide receiver, led the team with 59 receptions for 757 yards, 12.8 yards per reception, 4 touchdowns. Folks, when I say this offense lacked firepower, they literally lacked firepower. All right, we got a few more minutes to go. Let me get through the offense and defensive splits here, and then we'll get you the final grade and final verdict for Rutgers. All right, in their 7 wins, offense averaging 34 points per game. Still could only muster 199 yards passing on 26 attempts, 7.7 yards per passing attempt, 12.8 yards per completion. When you're down below 8.5, you're not pushing the ball down the field. Now, where this team was getting it done was on the ground. 43 rushing attempts per game, 200 yards per game rushing, 4.7 yards per rushing attempt there. Third down conversion, this team was 46% on third downs, 63% on fourth downs. Committed just 3 turnovers in those 7 victories. In the 5 losses, wow, 19 points per game, 213 yards passing, but now you're doing it on 36 attempts. 5.8 yards per attempt, 11.8 yards per completion. Like I said, wide receivers, no juice. This is exactly what I'm referencing. 37 rushing attempts per game, 143 yards per game rushing, 3.9 yards per rushing attempt. Could not get the ground game going in all 5 of their losses. Third down conversion in those 5 losses, 38% compared to the 46% in those 7 victories. 44% conversion rate on third downs, committed 5 turnovers in those 5 losses. So as I mentioned, when this team lost, they were running for 57 fewer yards per game and still couldn't get a great yards per rushing attempt. On the defensive side, in those 7 victories, this defense was giving up 16 points per game. Opponents, 209 yards passing on 36 attempts, 5.9 yards per passing attempt, 10.2 yards per completion. So you're making the opponent throw shorter, and then you're tackling immediately after the reception there. Good job. 26 rushing attempts, 136 yards per game rushing, 5.1 yards per rushing attempt is what they were surrendering in the victories. 40% conversion rate for their opponents, 33% on third downs, did force 8 turnovers in those 7 victories. That's not a lot. Okay, so in their 5 losses, 34 points per game allowed. Opponents throwing for almost 60 more yards per game to the tune of 269 yards per game. 30 passing attempts. So the pass attempts go down, the yardage still goes up. 9.1 yards per attempt, passing attempt, 13.7 yards per completion. The ground game was absolutely phenomenal for the opponents. 36 rushing attempts, 164 yards per game, 4.6 yards per rushing attempt. What that tells me is their opponents were dominating on the ground in those losses there. The opponents on third downs were converting 45% and converted all 6 attempts on fourth downs when Rutgers lost, only forced 4 turnovers. So this team, like I mentioned, defense could not turn over the opponents. Playmakers, no juice whatsoever. So let's go ahead and get to the final grade and then the final verdict. And the Rutgers Scarlet Knights will receive a grade of a B-. The fact that you didn't play the elite of your conference is a little bit disappointing to only have 7 wins on the season, but exceeding that win total is always paramount. Final verdict. Rutgers showed a promise with a solid run game and competitive play against quality opponents, but defensive struggles against the pass and inconsistencies in the red zone prevented this team from a higher ceiling. Addressing the pass coverage and red zone efficiency on offense will be key to their future. Let's go ahead and continue on with that thought here. Rutgers showed signs of progress last season. The defense, like I said, was solid and kept them competitive, but offensive limitations prevented the Scarlet Knights from taking the next step. Lack of turnovers, coupled with big play abilities by their opponent's offense, made it difficult to pull off upsets last year. So in our final minute or so, let's talk about what Rutgers needs to do in 2025 to improve on that win-loss record. First and foremost, you got to elevate the quarterback play. More efficiency and fewer mistakes will help open up this offense. Key number 2, this team has got to go find some playmakers, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, maybe a quarterback that gives you a little bit more in the ground game. Whatever it takes, you got to become more explosive on the offensive side of the ball. And then finally, defensively, you got to get more aggressive and force more turnovers, especially when you're in a pile with a running back. You got to try to punch that ball out and make sure you secure the tackle first and foremost. But until you can generate more turnovers, this offense is going to struggle because it did not show the tendencies of being able to drive the field against better competition. If Rutgers can focus on these areas, Rutgers can once again push for a winning record and make another bowl game in 2025.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at CrunchTimeSportsAdvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football Autopsy Report.